The fantasy playoffs are coming. And in most dynasty leagues, that means the trade deadline is right around the corner. Now, we can debate all day and night about whether or not a trade deadline in dynasty is necessary, but for many of you, it's coming up. And this is one of the most important times on the dynasty calendar. Because as college students know best, nothing spurs action quite like a deadline. So today's video is all about the kinds of moves you should be making at the trade deadline, whether you're a playoff team or you're on the outside looking in. My name is Paul. This is Pure Potential. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment. Let's get into it. Now, right away, I'd just like to say the purpose of this video is not to highlight specific players that I'm targeting in trades right now. Hopefully, we can talk about some trade targets on this week's live stream. Subscribe so you don't miss it. But today, I'm focused on the strategy side. How should you actually approach the trade deadline as a contender or as a rebuilder? What should your mindset be as that week approaches? I'm going to start on the contending side, and I want to reiterate an extremely important point for any new viewers out there. You should never go all in Dynasty. You should never be pushing all of your buying power into a current season, knowing that if it doesn't work out for you, you're just going to be in a total disaster of a rebuild for years to come. That is never a good strategy. You shouldn't be trading the world to upgrade your flex spot from Tyler Lockett to Derrick Henry. Even though that seems like an awesome idea, it seems like it would give you a massive edge. The truth is that over just a handful of games, the difference between those two players is unlikely to have an impact on whether you win or lose a game. And that is because the margin of victory in a typical fantasy matchup is quite high. Close games just really aren't the norm, even in the playoffs. And even the best teams are more likely to lose in the playoffs than win the championship. According to a study by Adiko, the brain behind Dynasty Data Lab, which I did cite in my first ever strategy video, the number one seed in the fantasy playoffs wins the championship about 32% of the time. And the number two seed wins about 26% of the time. And that's specifically in dynasty leagues. So even with a bye week, which is a huge advantage, your odds are still about 1 in 3 at best. So when I say never go all in, I'm saying don't make this season the only one that matters. Don't say I'm going to win the championship this year, or I'm not going to even sniff the playoffs again until 2027. That is not how you want to build your team. You want to give yourself a chance in as many different seasons as possible. So my point here isn't to dissuade you from purchasing any players at the trade deadline. Not at all. I'm not saying you can't go out and trade for a Derrick Henry or a Joe Mixon or an Alvin Kamara if that's possible. But I think it should dissuade you from shifting a significant portion of your future buying power into this current season, especially if you already have a bye week, because there's just not that much more you can do at that point. There's still going to be variance, weekly variance, just lurking there, waiting to ruin your perfect season. And there is no such thing as an unbeatable fantasy team. If you go out there and you burn all your future draft picks, you trade away all your young players, chasing a super team, you're just going to run into something known as diminishing returns, which basically means that with each additional win now trade that you're making, you're actually getting less and less of a benefit as you kind of max out those championship odds. So what I'm advocating for here is moderation. Okay, go out and make some tactical trades. Maybe you can find a way to upgrade the weakest spot in your starting lineup. Maybe you can trade a second to get a valuable depth piece just in case there's an injury, right? Those are the types of moves you want to make. I made 2 trades this week, gearing up for a playoff run. In the first one, my RB3 was Trey Benson. So I'm starting Montgomery and Achane every week. I have basically no startable running backs after that. So I went out and traded Javonte Williams and Dontavian Wicks for James Conner. So I went over to a non-playoff team and I traded them Javonte Williams and Dontavian Wicks for James Conner. Okay, they get a couple of young players who, maybe have some upside. It's not really about the players, whether you like them or not. Young players for a 29, almost 30-year-old running back, that's not a player that a non-playoff team really wants to be holding on to. And my second trade was another one, just looking to add some running back depth. I went out and traded my second and Jalen Coker for Ramondre Stevenson. And pretty much the same deal. This is a team that is not making the playoffs. They've got a running back that is, past the age apex. They would rather offload that risk, go ahead and grab a pick, grab a young player. We can both win that type of a deal. And trading can be really easy when you and the other team have opposite goals. So right now, this is a great time to go and hit up those teams that are clearly not making the playoffs. See if you can take a productive player or two off their hands for a reasonable price. And if that team understands the basics of Dynasty, which certainly is a big if, there are plenty of managers out there that would gladly cut off their nose to spite their face. But the managers that actually know how the market works, they should know that right now is their best chance to cash out on productive veteran players. Guys like Alvin Kamara will never hold more dynasty value than they do today. Derrick Henry will never have more dynasty value than he does today. That's just how it works with older players that are currently scoring a lot of points. And that's going to bring us over to the rebuilding side. And I want to be clear here. If your team is eliminated from the playoffs or unlikely to make the playoffs, I am considering you a rebuilder. All I mean by that is that you're prioritizing future seasons over the current season. And as a rebuilder, you're not really in a position to be stubborn as a trade partner. I've got one league where the trade deadline is this week, and there's a non-playoff team who has Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, Russell Wilson, and he made an announcement in the league chat that his players are not going to be discounted for contenders, and if anything, the price is actually higher. Because in his eyes, if you want to go out and win the championship, then you have to pay up for these assets. And that's great in theory. And I certainly don't think you need to go out and ship off all your productive players for pennies on the dollar. You should certainly shop around. You should try to get the best possible return. And sometimes you're just not going to get fair value for those assets. Like if the best offer you can get for Alvin Kamara is a late second, then you might as well just hold him. Right? You're not benefiting from that trade. But as a non-playoff team, it is in your best interest to trade away productive players that are in or past their prime right now, because those players are depreciating assets. The vast majority of them are going to be worth less once the season is over. And this is really just simple logic, okay? The appeal of Derrick Henry is that he's currently scoring 20 points per game. So anyone acquiring Derrick Henry today gets 7 more games of him this season, barring injury, where he's scoring 20 plus points per game. And even if you think Henry can come out and do that again next year in Baltimore, these 7 games still make up what? 35% of his remaining dynasty value. So once this season is over, his value is just naturally going to drop. He's currently the 38th overall player on Fantasy Calc, and I would be shocked if he remains inside the top 60 once the offseason hits. So to a non-playoff team that's not using his production, Derrick Henry is just a hot potato that you don't want to be holding when the music stops. And this is really the main point. As a rebuilder, you should be evaluating potential trades based on where you think assets are going to be valued in the offseason rather than where they're being currently valued. This is never an exact science, but if we do look at past startup ADP, that can give us a pretty good baseline. So thanks to Dynasty Data Lab, we can see that in startups from April and May of this year, Mike Evans was the 80th overall player off the board. And that was immediately following a top 10 points per game finish where he was being drafted at the 2-3 turn of redraft leagues. So despite him coming off a great season, despite high expectations for him in 2024, he was still going in Dynasty startups within half a round of Keon Coleman, Bo Nix, Trey Benson. So early second round rookie picks. So if you have him on a non-playoff team and somebody's offering you an early second, even an early to mid second, you should take it and run. Because if that's where he was valued last offseason, think about where he's going to be valued this offseason. Now he's 31. Now he's not coming off a great year. Now he's had another injury that people have to think about when they click the draft button, right? He is almost certainly going to be drafted after players that go in the early second in rookie drafts. So you can hold on and be stubborn. You can tell your league mates, I'm only trading Mike Evans for a first. Did you see what he scored earlier this year? He's going to be a league winner down the stretch. You can say that all you want. But if you hold on to Mike Evans and decline, an early second, a second and a third, you are probably going to lose that deal once the offseason hits, and you're opening yourself to all kinds of other risks as well. Now, if we just look at where all the 2024 rookies were going in startups, we can see that those late first players, the guys like Brian Thomas, Jonathan Brooks, Ladd McConkey, they were all on that 6-7 turn. So unless you're extremely confident that your veteran player is still going to be valued top 60, top 65 overall in Dynasty during the offseason, you should be thrilled to ship them off for a first. Okay, you should be rushing out to trade Joe Mixon for a first if your team is not in the playoffs. You should be rushing out to trade Cooper Kupp for a first if your team's not in the playoffs. I promise you, you're going to want to do that. You probably want to do it for an early second even. Because even on top of that, just natural declining value that comes with aging, that comes with losing remaining games in their career, you also have to layer in things like injury risk. There's basically no trade market for guys like Stephon Diggs and Chris Godwin at this point, right? And that's just another reason you don't want to carry these players through to the end of the year. Not that we can predict specifically which players are going to get hurt, but if an older player does get hurt, if they suffer a significant injury, you've lost a ton of value and you're never getting that value back. Unlike young players who tend to rebound, Stephon Diggs is never going to rebound to his pre-injury price tag. Chris Godwin is never going to be worth a late first again like he was earlier this year. That's just the nature of 28, 29, 30-year-old guys that have season-ending injuries. But even outside of injury risk, you have things like job security risk. You have contract risk with a ton of these veteran players. Evan Ingram's fantasy value is propped up by bad coaching. No team should want Evan Ingram to be their every down tight end leading their team in targets. And the second the Jaguars have a coach that doesn't want to do that, there goes Evan Ingram's fantasy value. Najee Harris is a free agent after this season. Who's to say if he's a starter on another team? Or who's to say that he returns to Pittsburgh as the starter? We have no idea what to expect for him in the long run. Cooper Kupp is probably going to have to deal with another offseason of Matthew Stafford retirement narratives or Cooper Kupp can't stay healthy narratives. All of these things are going to drive down the value of 27, 28, 29, 30-year-old players, and you just don't want to deal with that if you're not benefiting from the points they're putting in your team right now. So just to put a nice bow on it, the point here is that holding on to productive players as a non-playoff team invites a ton of downside risk and very little upside. So even if you're not in the playoffs, you should be extremely active at the trade deadline and you shouldn't be greedy. Anyway, that's gonna do it for today, guys. As always, thanks so much for watching the video. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you enjoy my content, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It really goes a long way. Best possible way that you can support my work here at Pure Potential. And if you have any questions about today's video, go ahead and leave a comment below. I can try to work those into the live stream on Saturday. And if you wanna get even more Dynasty content from me, you can hit that join button underneath the video or on my channel page and become a YouTube member today. That's gonna get you access to my top 200 Dynasty rankings, my weekly members only live streams, and the member chat where I talk with YouTube members each and every day about their leagues, about possible trades. So I think that's a great option as well if you're looking to take your Dynasty game to the next level. I'll be back soon with another Dynasty video. Hopefully I'll see you then.